Hi, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, based on where you are. My name is Shubhi Rajnish, and I have been working for the past 20 years in various roles leading digital and technology. My expertise and focus has been on driving and creating commercial value through technology, driving digital transformation, implementing the innovation, and building digital capability. Most of my experience is in the oil and gas industry. And through that, I have partnered with many technology companies from startups to the more established big names, learning from them, but also sharing with them how do we use the technology they provide to create a competitive advantage for the organization I work with. So I'm hopeful that in today's session, I would be sharing some of those thinking, some of those opinions and experiences I've had. Um, they are not necessarily attributable to any particular organization I work for. I work for in the past or currently, but hopefully they are of help. And I would love questions as we go through or towards the end of the conversation. Let me start with, first of all, talking about what are the stages of driving competitive advantage through technology? And this presentation is really focused more on the leadership aspects and the organizational aspects of it, as opposed to a specific technology choice. And in my experience, there are three stages, and I don't mean stages in the sense of one after the other, but there are three distinct parts when you think about competitive advantage through technology for your organizations. The first one is about evolving. So, are you an organization which is going to be left behind your competitors if you don't evolve and if you don't use technology in the right way to evolve? And today we'll explore a little bit more about what that might mean. The next stage in my mind is innovate, and as I said, they can go hand in hand. They don't have to be one after the other. And innovate is a lot more about how do you create new products, new services, and new experiences for your customers. So how do you create that commercial value through innovation? And finally, unlock. And this is where you're really trying to disrupt your own business model in the more positive sense of the word, i.e., you're trying to make sure that you're not obsolete or disrupted. And unlock is one of the things which has been debated for a long time, and companies which have been able to drive themselves to evolve, to innovate, or to be ready for any disruption by disrupting their own business lines, again in a positive sense, have been seen to move ahead with their digital and technology journey. However, that group is very small. So how do you make sure you're part of that group? And that's what I'm going to focus today on. Dr. Fatma, before I go ahead, is there anything else you wanted me to share as part of my introduction?
Thank you very much. Just go ahead, please. It's wonderful.
Thank you. So let's talk about evolve for a minute. And this is about making your business competitive. And when I say your business model competitive, it's not just about one or the other. And many times, trying to drive competitive advantage through technology or through digital transformation, people tend to focus more on the process aspect of it and the customer aspects of it. But I would like to assert that your employees and the integration of your value across your business model are of equal importance to actually drive digital transformation or to gain competitive advantage. And making your business competitive is about challenging the norm and challenging where you are right now. So that means if you feel that even if you are doing really well at this point, you have to think about the future and think about how you can use technology to create a pipeline which will always keep you ahead so that you're not overtaken by two main things. Other organizations coming with a disruptive model which disrupts your industry or your organizational area, or just by your competitors who have decided to be much more leaner and faster than you. So let's talk about each one of these for a minute. So let's talk about customers first. And I think the word customer experience has been used quite a bit and continuously. So, and it means different things for different people, but at the end of the day, it's about what is the new way of interacting with your customer. And that's where technology plays a big part in terms of how your consumers and customers behave at this point compared to how they might have through your traditional channels or the ways you have worked with traditionally. So anticipating that and designing your products and services for how the customers live in this digital world is really important. If anything, during this current COVID crisis, we have seen that almost all organizations have had to rethink their channels and think through what type of customer experience that they can provide, which will still keep that customer base if it is not the sort of face-to-face interaction which they might be used to, or the more fixed asset channels which they might be used to. So thinking about how your technology shapes that for your customers is a number one priority when you think about competitive advantage through technology. Let's talk about employees. So the employees are part of the organization. They have been working in a certain way. What does it mean for employees? Again, I would assert that it's a critical part for your organization to be competitive is for your employees to be productive in different ways. And what I mean to say by that is, if they are used to working in a certain way, and you see your competitors or the world outside disrupting your model, then the employees need to think about how they work in a different way. And that can be through providing them with the right technology, and that can be through providing them with the right ways of working and being more agile and within your organization. It is very much about how do you empower your employees and how do you allow them to make decisions using data, using analytics. How do you partner, for example, AI along with what your employees bring to the table? How do you train those models with your employees? And they are a key part of that success, given they have your business knowledge, they have the ability to translate that into what it might mean in the future. So how do you use technology in conjunction with employees? And many times employees feel that it is something which is happening to them as opposed to them being part of it. And they really need to feel a lot more part of the conversation if they're not doing so already, of course, and feel that they have a say in how you can change the shape of what you're doing, especially if they are in more individual contributing roles, and if they are in more specialist roles. How do you take what you're developing from an AI perspective or an RPA perspective and actually bring it together with what the employees can bring to the table? The next part of it for me is processes, and this is the one which is discussed a lot. It's about automation of processes. It's about having your process digitized, not necessarily digital, but digitized, and making them leaner. I would assert that while as it is great to automate and digitize your process, take the opportunity to think through how those processes are structured today. Do they really give you that competitive edge? And should you challenge the process in itself? So an example might be, you have a process to reach certain decision points, and different roles interact with that particular process. But you can have AI agents trained to do some of the work. You can actually disrupt the entire process model itself and say, well, actually, we float from A to B to C, but now that's not what we want. We can get to C much quicker by using data analytics, and we really don't need A and B. So many times what organizations do is they take the existing process and they think about how can they automate it or how they can digitize it. I would say when you're thinking about competitive advantage, especially, you want to really see if that process is valid, and if actually the technology which you have at hand can change that process totally without following it in the same order or automating it in the same order. So don't just change the process and just in the same way and just automate it. Actually make a fundamental difference to it and remove the handovers on the interaction of the process. The final part I'll talk about is sort of integration, and it's a broad word, integration. What does it mean? For me, it means connected value. So different part of your organization sometimes try to drive different outcomes. For you to be competitive, I think even without the technology conversation in the mix, you do need to be pulling in the same direction. And I think that's a given. But what technology can help you do is integrate areas which haven't worked together essentially together. You can look at your supply chain and say how it actually integrates much more closer through technology with your production or pricing or marketing functions, which in the past might have been loosely connected. So it's about finding what your value are, what is your connected value across your organization. It's not about the process, it is really more about thinking through what your value points might be, where is it being created, what is driving your revenue, and connecting those points into one seamless platform. And again, using a lot of technology choices, you can do that do that in a much more faster way than you might have in the past. So gone are the days where you're trying to fit in processes together and integrate them and bring in departments and cross-fertilize. You really can't make a step change using some of the technology available to you. And so my view would be, as you think about your business model, if you want to drive competitive advantage to technology, don't just think about the technology. Don't think that, if I went to cloud computing, that will make a difference. If I implemented AI, that would make a difference. If I had bots and RPAs, then that would make a difference. All of it would, but in what context and in what way are you trying to reshape your organization? And I would say approach it from the outcomes to customer, employees, process, and what integration and value points you want to create, to really then comprehend how you can use the technology to drive competitive advantage. Each business area is different, each industry area is different. So also think carefully about what technology would help you achieve that in the fastest way. Not everybody needs to apply the same technology choices or have too much in every area, which might distract from you being competitive. So that's sort of evolved. That is about your business model, evolving it and becoming truly digital, as opposed to digitized, or as opposed to pockets of technology, maybe focus more on customers, maybe focus more on processes, depending on what you have chosen to do. I'm more than happy to take any questions during the conversations. If there are, please do feel free to put them through. So let's move to innovate. And where does innovate sit within competitive advantage through technology? And I'm going to say again that it's not that you evolve and you change everything and then you think, oh, what am I going to innovate on? Because competitive advantage is all about the window you have to be ahead. And that window will differ from the industry you are in. And that window, it was traditionally took years for somebody to gain that advantage or to move ahead of you, has reduced to a few months and events due to the technology advancement we have currently. So that window has become really narrow, and that means that you need to be evolving and innovating at the same time. So let's talk about innovate. And a lot of innovation conversations you'll see yourself in are a lot about what ideas do we have, how do we narrow them down. So pretty much from step 2 to 5. What I would assert is there is an important phase which organizations sometimes miss, and that's sort of discovery. And discovering what are their pain points, what are their value leakage points, and what are some of the on the ground thinking which might shape point 2 over there, which is ideas. So take the time to discover in your organization what are some of the new thinking, the new experiences, and new services you can provide using the same framework you have within your organization. So as you're evolving, you're also trying to find out where you can make a step change, what can be a new offering into the market, what could be a new experience for your customers or partners, depending on the type of industry you are in. So discover is quite key. doing it continuously is quite key. So again, I would have loved to make this in a circle. I have it in a line, but these are also things which are continuous in terms of their steps. So take the time to discover, move to the idea phase, find a way to categorize your ideas. What happens is organizations sometimes say, hey, I want to collect all the ideas I have for new products, services, and experiences, because that might give me something different. It's important to look at those ideas and think through what is just merely about evolving what you have and what is truly game changing. It is really important to narrow down at the ideas phase, because if you take forward too many ideas, you're spending too much money on proof of concept, proof of value, etc., without really going after the key. So my assertion would be, or my opinion would be, that you need to think through your ideas and think through how you narrow them down. Think about the capability you have as well when you're talking about ideas. Think about what your business outcomes as well, because sometimes you will find people saying, well, we had all these great ideas, but nobody wants to take them forward, or everything has to go forward. And you have to strike a balance and have a framework about how you would evaluate and prioritize ideas. The next part is key. I would say don't take an idea forward until unless you can create a proof of value. And I don't mean you need to do extensive work, but you really need to find a proof point, whether that is a market research, whether that is a proof of value through a technology choice, or whether that's a proof of value through taking a small part of your business and putting the idea through that part of the business. But determine the proof of value. And when you determine the proof of value, what you would find is what seemed like a small idea and might have seemed quite straightforward would actually start expanding into what more and more you can do. So you actually again go through an increase in what you can experiment with and actually start implementing. So you can see it sort of grows from, starts with discovery, loads of ideas, start thinking and narrowing it down through values, and then again you will see you have multiple things you can experiment with. So again, carefully experiment with the ones you want to take forward, and then finally refine, launch them and refine them. I would always recommend that you do that in the wider framework of your outcomes. You do that in the wider framework of your revenues work streams. But don't worry about if you are actually, don't worry too much about the fact that that is something which which might create some disruption in your own product lines. The whole idea of innovating is to create some of that disruption ahead of your competition. So definitely think through that in terms of, don't reject ideas or services and new products because you feel that might disrupt something which is really close to a lot of your management, a lot of your teams, etc. So think through that and ensure that you are challenging the organization when you're talking about innovation. So, hey, we are evolving, but we're also innovating. So what does that mean? That means that some of our traditional value delivery mechanisms might fundamentally need to change. You're not going to be able to make the difference if you don't have that commitment. So let me move to the last one, which is unlock. And now this one I have put in with some caution because not every organization is set up the same way. But this is purely a technology play for me. So first of all, your technology strategy needs to be dynamic because the world around you is changing. So I've come across areas where you have technology strategies which seem to be 5 years, 6 years, etc., but they're obsolete in a few months, essentially. So what I mean by dynamic strategy is strategy is not your technology strategy or what technology stack you want to work with is not a static piece of work, which means you have to break it down into manageable enough chunks so that you can change them and swap them if your external environment requires to do that. So basically getting really, really nimble about how you create your technology strategy. And the same goes for applying technology. So how you do that, in the fashion you do that, the way you choose to implement it is important. I would say multi-year programs trying to get to an outcome, you're probably not setting up for success. Trying to think about your minimum viable products, trying to think through what is a correct piece of work to go after to gain that advantage is really important. And I think most organizations do get that part mostly correct, but then you have to really think about if you are a business area which doesn't really sell technology, and you now have products which are totally digital based and technology based, do you know whether you are managing the intellectual property of that? How are you actually creating that new revenue stream? And again, I will go back to, is it competing with your existing revenue streams, and is it a disruptor? So a monetization of that, and thinking about how you would price it, how would you create that, and how you would take it to market is a whole art in itself. So what happens is you have a great technology product, you have a great digital product, it really works well, but then you don't know how to really monetize it, because it totally has challenged all of your previous pricing or marketing models. So how do you really move into that monetization part is really important to think about upfront. It feels like the last step, but it has to go hand in hand with what you are doing on your technology, essentially. And fundamentally, through those three things is where how you are trying to gain advantage. Each of them is heavily dependent on technology. It's heavily dependent on what technology you choose, but I would recommend that you think about all of the things around your technology choice and your technology strategy for it to be really successful, because putting in the technology is not going to really do the job essentially. So it's competitive advantage. It has to be about the business, and then it has to be about how technology enables it. So those are the three stages. Again, I'm happy to take any questions right now or later on. I'm just checking if in case there is anything. I can see Majid has raised his hand. Is there a question you want to ask?
Thank you for your slides and presentation. Actually, I have been an investor in advanced technology. I can say there are two kinds of technology: advanced technologies and normal technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that advanced technology needs very high equipment and advanced laboratories and so on.
Mm-hmm.
You are related the business with the technology, and that's really, it's a competitive advantage. But in the real world, through my experience,
Mm-hmm.
there is a model called Technology Readiness Level,
Mm-hmm.
TRL.
Mm-hmm.
And this model has been developed through NASA since the mid of 70s.
Sure.
And it's 9 levels actually. And there is the first 3 levels is okay, but the problem is with the level from 3 to 7. So the idea, you don't know exactly how much time your technology is ready to be launched in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Second, how much money it costs to be spent on that in these levels from level 3 to 7. And that's a dilemma actually facing the ones who have a patent, especially advanced technology patents.
Yeah.
Now, who will finance that steps in order to get out from the bottleneck and launch the market, the technology to be a product? And the first thing, they have to have an offtake for that product from an external customer.
Yeah.
Now, when we see the stock markets and we see bonds and we see also a hybrid bonds, there's in the Islamic bond, they call it sukuk, hybrid bonds, which in the bond is linked with the assets. So nobody consider the patent is an asset. And actually it is an asset, but it's not a real asset. It does not have a meaning in the accounts standards. So there is an idea to develop a financial product which called technology bond. And that bond, somebody can buy that bond, and then he has a risk. If the technology is launched in the market, as a breakthrough, his bond will be skyrocketed. So I didn't see any stock market authorities, they allow this kind of product, which I can see it is a solution for this issue. We have a lot of technologies in the world. We have a lot of patents in the world, but what is commercialized may only 5%. And this is what is commercialized also by big companies where they allocate money from their dividends, or so depends. The 2% actually the standard, and some companies, especially the medium companies, go to 5%. So now I know that the technology is a competitive advantage, but when it is commercialized. So what is your comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Majid. I think that's a great perspective to share with all of us here. And I absolutely agree with you that it is a lot about how do you commercialize the technology, and the size of the organization really determines that, because this is not there is a cost attached to it, and there has to be a return on investment. Larger corporations try and do that through spinning off smaller companies and startups and giving them the ability and the backing to do so. You also do that. They also do that by partnering with startups or areas where there are niche technologies, so they get the ability to get the intellectual property. So that's one mechanism organizations use. Having said that, protecting your intellectual property, protecting your patent, and really thinking about whether you'll be able to commercialize it is exactly what I'm trying to say here. So not every organization is set up to do that. And for them to gain advantage, you have to really think about what stage you are in. Are you more about evolving yourself for advantage? Are you more about innovating, or are you more about actually on the advanced side of technology, you have something new brand new to offer to the market, and you don't have the commercializing acumen to actually do that? And is there a need for you to get that within your organization or partner with other organizations? I really can't comment on how the stock market treats it, but and looks at it, because that's sort of not an you probably have better viewpoint than me on that. However, if you are within an organization and you do want to monetize things, it will help to set it up in a way that it is nimble, it has a startup view, and it is able to hold on its own despite your other revenue streams. So that would be my perspective on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I can move to my last.
Go ahead, please.
So there are some prerequisites, and I think actually Majid pointed out to one of them in what he was sharing. And what the biggest one of them is commitment. So for you to be doing any of this, right, from evolving or unlocking or looking at advanced technology or researching it or putting in the infrastructure which you need to do that, sometimes you need commitment in the organization. And I would say, depending on how you're structured, from the management and board, to say this is what we are going to go after. It is really difficult to achieve any of this without having that top-down commitment. And I would say, if you are in an influencing position, in a leadership position, that is one of the things you should work on before you even get into the technical conversation around this. Do you have the commitment to really use technology for driving competitive advantage? And I don't mean a yes or why wouldn't we type of commitment. A yes, we are happy to relook at our revenue streams. We are happy to look at our people capability, and we're happy to relook at our culture. The next, I would say, is capability. And capability is really important from the perspective of you need a totally different set of capability to do some of this. And you have to really think about what within your current workforce is transferable and what within your current workforce you need new, and you do need both. So I firmly subscribe to the view that every organization has a lot of expertise in their organization. How do they really convert that expertise? How do they take their employees on this technology and digital journey from whatever their discipline is? Because that is key. There will be a point where almost everybody will have to have some amount of digital acumen and technology acumen. And the earlier the organizations start helping their employees to get there, the quicker it would be. But also, for you to be successful in anything from AI to RPA to anything more advanced, you need the expertise and the experience which your employees currently hold. So how do you actually use that and unlock that is definitely a prerequisite. If you haven't given thought to your capability, then you can embark on many journeys, but it will be difficult to take them to completion. And finally, culture. And culture is very, very, and I mean organizational culture over here. It obviously depends on how you're organized, whether you're a global organization, whether you're a regional organization. It totally depends on that. But nevertheless, what you have to really investigate is the drive within the organization to do this differently. And it's different from commitment, because this is about really changing how you work, really changing the fundamentals of what is valued by the organization. And culture can be driven obviously by thinking through and rolling out new ways of working, getting everybody onto the same page and same direction, but it needs to go deeper. It needs to change the fabric of how you manage performance, how you think about recruitment, how you think about retaining people, and it really needs to make a fundamental shift to people being comfortable in an organization which is moving ahead from a technology and a digital perspective. And there are no pockets. So sometimes one of the things I hear is, oh, well, those departments are really important and they should go through a cultural shift, but my department is okay because we really don't need any of this technology or digital. And that is not true. I would go back to my first point around integration and the connection of value and integration. Your entire organization needs to go through that culture shift, and it is definitely a prerequisite towards you being successful. So just to reiterate at this point, before we get into more questions, my view is that if you're trying to gain competitive advantage through technology, you have to think a lot more than just technology. You have to think about how you want to evolve your organization. You need to think about how you want to innovate. And you definitely want to think about how you actually unlock some of the potential, specifically when it comes to new technology offerings, advanced technology, or setting up the organization, the infrastructure around the organization to enable that. And only embark on that journey, or only think about that journey when you are able to have the belief and the commitment, the vision around it, obviously, the capability and the right culture. So to me, that in itself is how I would recommend you think about competitive advantage through technology, beyond what you do deep dive into the technology, the choice of the technology, whether you are what part you're using, how you're using data, and I think those are also deep topics. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Any question, please? Okay, I have one question for you.
Sure.
Related to the business model design and technology, and how strategy is supposed to be very dynamic to be adapted within the organization. Do you suggest a time span for testing the strategy and recorrecting the implementation at certain time out of your experience? This is number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, we understand now that strategy is related to planning. And planning is part of AI. And when AI will be implemented at strategy level within an organization, and also implemented at the level of strategy, it should fix all the errors that might come and align the part that is related to the higher administration level as well as the operational level, including the users as well. So do you think, out of your experience also, that this alignment has been done within your organization? And if yes, can you please tell us how you dealt with that? Thank you.
So let me talk about dynamic strategy and sort of how you plan for strategy. I think that was your first question. I would say that why I'm suggesting that you have a changing strategy is because the environment around you is going to change. So you have a vision and a view where you want to get to, but the strategy is more about how do you actually convert it into the direction for the organization. And while as you can create a forward-looking strategy, what you have to do is to test and reiterate. So I think based on what you said, I would absolutely agree that it's something which you reshape and shape. You also have to have it in very specific blocks, because what you don't want to do is every few months try and change your entire strategy. That's not going to work. You have to really be clear on what part is impacted by what technology, and hence how do you really take that one singular part of your strategy and reiterate it. So I think that is where my first answer would be. The second around AI, in my experience, it is still something which organizations are working through. And I think as technologists, we might feel that the ultimate goal of it being able to manage and plan for us and strategize is much closer than what in general organizations might think it is. So can you apply it? Yes. Can you actually get to a place where your planning and strategy is driven through AI? Yes, absolutely. But the question is, can you really train the AI at this point, depending on where your relative organization might be in its understanding? So from a technologist perspective, I would say absolutely. But from a business perspective, I would say there is a gap between the understanding of what it can do versus how it needs to be worked into your regular practices. I think data-driven decision-making and data analytics is moving far ahead of what I would call truly cognitive AI comparatively. And that's much better understood probably than cognitive AI, is how I would answer that. I'm just conscious of time. I do see Professor Selva, you've put your hand up. Is there a question you want to ask?
Yes.
Yes, please, Professor Selva.
Thank you very much. This was really very informative, especially going in, from the business part. I worked in an institute and I tried so much to push artificial intelligence, and there was just so much bureaucracy and time was being wasted. So I understand when you say organization, but I wanted to sort of play the flip side of it. So I decided to resign, and I've been working there for 35 years and opened my own little company. And I will tell you that in doing that, I was able to get so much things propagated and accomplished. But of course, I didn't do it alone. Then as a private company, I dealt with the big entities, but I came to them as a private entity. So there was no bureaucracy. They didn't have to. And in fact, seeing that I was a startup, a lot of them actually sympathized and would help. So I think also, if you're bound by, your organization and you have so much innovation and you want to move forward, I honestly did that, and I have found it, and it's only been like 7 months. Well, the COVID also played a part, but I have found it so rewarding, and I just wanted to, lay that out to the listeners, because it's something they might consider if there is a lot of bureaucracy and resistance to their innovations or to whatever they want to do moving forward in artificial intelligence. Because we have to remember, artificial intelligence is sort of the new buzzword. And I will tell you, here in Saudi Arabia, it is fairly new because we really don't have much, and I'm talking in my specialty as an ophthalmologist, much solutions. And I had to use solutions from abroad and then customize it. So again, you know, don't be tied down and, you know, be put in a box simply because your organization, you know, dictates that on you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I comment on Dr. Salwa?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Salwa, thank you for your points. The ones who is doing the investment in the startup companies who have advanced technologies, actually they don't do it from the point that they are helping or not. They are doing it from their investment point of view. And the idea that we don't have a venture capital companies that will take that risk in a way. The funding for investing in startup and advanced technologies, it has a high risk. The highest risk ever in business is to invest in advanced technology commercialization, if you scan all the kind of business. But the very professional venture capitalists, they will have a basket, and that basket, let's say they will have 10 or 20 or 30 technologies that they decide to invest in. And if one of them break out, it will cover all the costs of the others, and there where is the profit come from? The bureaucracy that you are talking about is the public money that come from the government. And this situation exists in all the governments in the whole world. And if we go for the venture capitalists, I don't think that this industry is developed only in the United States. Even in Europe, it's not developed, even by private sectors, by private companies. I come across this experience myself. I'm an investor in advanced technologies, I'm owner for advanced technologies, and so on.
Yeah.
So the idea is, the issue is the venture capitalist professional entities or companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid. And I think I'm getting a prompt that we are almost out of time. So if I may just say, Professor Salwa, I think what you're trying to do is really groundbreaking in terms of actually not worrying about the bureaucracy, but actually trying to make the change. And my perspective would be that you need both. You do need the commercially minded view, but you also need to use technology for, you know, improvement of society overall. And if it can go hand in hand and it can create the revenue, that is the best sort of I would say sweet spot for all of us as technologists to get to. With that, I've exceeded my time, is what I'm being told. So I would thank you all for your inputs and your questions. And, you know, I'm really glad I've been able to share this with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions offline if any of you have them.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the nice presentation that you've given, and we look forward to see you again. Thank you, Shubhi.
Thank you.
Dr. Fatma.